So, hello and welcome along to Isolation Interviews for Hospital Radio Reading and for my YouTube channel. And I am super excited to be joined by, he's a bit of an acting icon, the amazing Dominic Coleman. How are you, Dominic? Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a very generous introduction. Thank you, and thanks for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be here.
No, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on. And I mean, people will recognize you from so many different roles and shows that you've been in. We will try and talk about some of those in a little while. But where did it come from? Where did the love of performing, where did the interest come from for yourself?
The desperate need to show off, I think, and to be noticed. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that I always I used to really well. I love the effect of making someone laugh. I've always really sort of enjoyed that, and kind of craved that attention as a kid, I think. And often to sort of to deal with situations that I might have found tricky otherwise, if I'm honest. So there was a lot of that going on, and I found an outlet in acting that allowed me to continue with that. And I never really sort of, certainly setting out, I wanted to be a serious actor, which I think is probably a bit of a cliche, but and then found that actually people kind of would sort of take my efforts as a bit of a joke. So I ended up drifting into comedy, and was very pleased to do that, to be honest. And it felt like it was something that was a bit more tangible and that was smaller than just being an actor in this huge kind of like place. I felt like if I focused in on sort of one particular thing, and in comedy, it felt a bit more doable, you know. So yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, do you remember your first time on a stage performing in front of an audience? And was nerve something, is that something you suffer with, or how
yeah.
does that work?
I do, and I can't remember the first time I said. Well, I remember vaguely playing St Francis of Assisi at some sort of primary school sort of play, and I was always into sort of dressing up and sort of clowning around or whatever. And I didn't really do drama. Certainly, I didn't really get into drama until I was 17. I did O-level drama at school, and that was because I had an amazing drama teacher. And I struggled at school. I didn't get any qualifications, and I was slightly off the rails, and my behaviour was a little bit all over the place. And I had one teacher who was, well, there were a few very good teachers at my school, but one particularly, Jenny Witts, who kind of took me aside and said, "Oh, you should do drama. You'd be really good at it." And I felt so seen and so like, wow, okay, I've got to try and do this thing. But I was really kind of shy and self-conscious. So that was always a bit of an odd sort of thing, that someone, that I was so worried about what people thought of me, that doing drama felt like a really sort of risky thing to do, but I felt compelled for some reason to do it. So my my memories of being on stage are really, of being really sort of like quite scared and having terrible stage fright, or a sense that I didn't want to let anybody down, so I didn't want to forget my lines. I took it really seriously. And actually, after I'd been to drama school, I was doing sort of theatre, and it stopped me doing theatre in the end, because I would be on stage and I'd be so sort of worried about losing my lines and, ruining the scene or whatever. I just spent my whole time on stage going, "It's my line next, it's my line next, blah, blah, blah," and then sort of, and I just thought, I can't work like this, and I don't get that anxiety, or I didn't get that anxiety beyond doing TV, because there's a safety net there that, if you make a mistake, you can go again. And that sort of suited me. And I like the sort of breaking scenes down into small chunks, which is what you do when you're filming. So I drifted into sort of TV. So I remember the excitement of being on stage. I remember getting feedback from an audience, which is fantastic, and a real sense of achievement. I did it. I got through it. But that became sort of slightly eroded by this kind of fear, as I say, of not wanting to let the side down, as it were, and taking it terribly, terribly seriously, which is fine, But I just kind of at some point thought, oh gosh, I'm not enjoying this, and I used to love it. I felt compelled to do it, and then I thought, oh no, I need to do something else. So I tried to get into TV, basically.
I mean, like I said earlier, people will recognize you from so many different roles, and like I said, we will talk about some of those. But do you remember the first time that you appeared in a show and it kind of gave you some notoriety? Do you remember the first time people came up to you and were like, "I saw you in such and such, and you were amazing." What was that like?
It was really fantastic actually, and I craved it. A lot of actors will say, "Oh no, I've never," but I did. I craved it. I wanted to feel validated. You know, I wanted to be noticed, which is kind of why I was there. I think now in retrospect, at the time I was just doing what I was doing, but really I wanted to be noticed. So the idea that someone would say, "I saw you," that was great. It was great. You were great. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I thrive on it, you know. And I've never understood. I get that people feel uncomfortable interacting, you know, and that's absolutely, you know, everybody's different. I've never had an issue with it. I've always really enjoyed people coming over. And it happens quite rarely these days. You know, I've not worked as much as I used to do for the last 5 or 6 years, really, with the general sort of slowdown and COVID and all of that stuff. So it's quite rare now that someone will come up to me. Whereas I had a period where every time I went out, someone would go, "Oh, Neville," or whatever, you know, and I'd love it. And it was great. But now it's very rare. So when it does happen, I really appreciate it. And I kind of go a bit over the top actually, because I want to just say how thrilled I am. And people have an odd thing. Often they'll say, "I'm really sorry. I hope you don't mind. But are you so?" And I go, "I don't mind in the slightest. I love that you've come over to talk to me. I really sort of, if I'm doing something that gives you one iota of pleasure, then I'm thrilled. You know, I'm delighted that something I'm associated with has given you some sort of, has been an uplifting experience for you or has affected you, you know, as a drama." So I absolutely love that, and I still occasionally get sort of fan letters, and I just was writing one yesterday actually, replying to someone because he sent me such a lovely letter, and I was like, "Wow, this is great," you know, and you feel like you're not working in isolation, you know, because I'm a bit self-obsessed, which may surprise you as an actor, slightly egocentric, you know, so it's quite good to be reminded actually, and I really appreciate it.
I mean, the other thing as well is, unlike a lot of other kind of, sort of genres, comedy is so hard to get right. So when you
Yeah.
get it right, it is fantastic. And you must love that, so many things that you've been a part of that just hit the mark. I mean, one of the ones that, I was sort of sitting back and watching recently, Miranda, of course. And I know
Yeah.
you only had a small role in that, but your character was just so memorable and so fun
Yeah.
to watch. You must have loved doing that.
It was fantastic. It was such a gift. And I'd known Miranda for a while. I met her at Edinburgh Festival when we were all sort of doing shows up there every year, you know, trying to sort of get a break or whatever. And I'd known her for a while, and I'd seen that she'd been doing the radio show, and then she got the TV version. And she very kindly sort of invited me to sort of play this kind of small guest role. And and it was, I had such a ball doing it. It was really good fun. And I was working on another sitcom at the time. So it was kind of in the middle of filming that, and it was all a bit manic, but I just found myself sitting up a tree in a park by the studio doing this sort of, you know, this kind of pickup shot, thinking, "Wow, look at me. I'm in a tree in a park pretending to be someone else, you know, watching some geese running around." It was completely nuts and really enjoyable. And then to have the audience reaction to that character, which kind of came because on the page it wasn't a lot. She even said, "Look, it's a really small part, you know." And I was like, no, I'd be thrilled to do it. And it just worked. It just kind of all came together. And to have that audience reaction was incredible. And I felt so lucky to be able to go back into the show in series 3. And we basically had a whole episode to ourselves, which was just crazy. And then Gary Barlow was in it. You know, it was like, wow, what is this? And what was mind blowing about that was that usually, like, you know, if you're doing a live studio sitcom, you have to wait for the laughs, you know, because the audience do laugh. They're really generous. And actually, if you're not careful, you can just kind of keep on talking and they'll miss the next line. You know, often it preempts a joke and they miss the big punchline. So there's always a reminder to sort of pause and let the audience laugh and then carry on sort of speaking, you know. So we were doing that. And then I came back in series 3 and it was like don't wait for the audience to stop laughing, because they don't. From the minute the show starts, it was complete sort of like fervor, and the noise and reaction, and just feeling that and being a part of it and sort of witnessing it actually. And I remember when Gary Barlow was about to come, and I kind of snuck up behind the audience because I wasn't in the scene, and just to watch the reaction, and they kind of went crazy, sort of threw their hands up in the air and stuff, which was just extraordinary. So yeah, that was the great character, and as you say, it was a small part, but it seemed to have a real impact, and it's one of the things that people still will come over and go, oh my god, you're so and so, your customer. Or Jim. Very few people know the character's name, but it's Jim. But yeah, it's really pleasing. Yeah.
I think that's one of the amazing things with, and I know, lockdown, there was a lot of, terrible things going on, but I think it really gave people a chance to sit back and rewatch a lot of their favorites. Programs like My Family were on,
Yeah.
Miranda, and shows like that where people could just kind of get lost in just a bit of fun for a half hour or so.
Yeah.
And that's what people need. And to a bit, because you've done My Family, you've done, I mean, so many amazing comedies. You must love the fact that you get to kind of do lots of roles in different projects. Is that quite a fun thing to be a part of, to do so much, across the board?
Yeah, and I've always been really lucky that I've done a real variety of stuff. Always sort of, certainly in drama, they're usually small parts. So you're kind of in for a couple of days and out again. And it's always a bit like, oh, I really want to do something a bit more chunky, But then I really appreciate sort of diving in, and it's a really good change of pace. Because at times, so I used to do a show Trollied for Sky, which was really lovely, but they were long shoots. I did like sort of 60 episodes of that show, something like that. So, and it was kind of relentless once you're in the middle of it. And likewise with the studio sitcoms, the way that they're filmed, it's quite hard work, and you just keep going. So then to go and do a drama where there is no pressure to try and get a laugh, it's way less theatrical, and you're just trying to play the truth. I used to find really a really nice way of sort of decompressing from that sort of comedy stuff and focusing on something else, and it being very quiet. I remember doing an episode of Peaky Blinders, and I was very lucky to be a part of that show, and the focus and the concentration on set there was really quite something. And I was very lucky to work with Helen McCrory, who obviously sadly died a couple of years ago. And it was extraordinary watching her work and that sort of level of focus, and how different it is, obviously, to doing a sitcom, I'm really grateful, actually, for all those opportunities.
Now, you did mention Trolley, another show that I loved. And I mean, Neville he didn't have a great deal of luck, let's say.
No.
Do you quite enjoy playing those kind of, I don't want to use the word loser roles, but I'm going to use the word loser roles. Do you quite like that sort of role where you really kind of can, really put a lot of the kind of very unpopular, kind of not always liked, because you can do so much with that, and I imagine for comedy that is just a gift.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think the beautiful thing about someone like Neville is that really he rarely sort of lets the reality of his situation actually sink in, and that there was a sort of breezy optimism about him generally. And then, he was aware that things would always go a little bit wrong, but he never stopped trying. And it was a really, very important sort of part of his character, because otherwise, sitcoms can be quite limiting. And you kind of feel sometimes, oh, I've said these lines. We've done this scene. We've kind of done this, and you keep sort of, but actually having this sort of eternal sort of optimistic approach to life was really sort of quite joyful, actually. And I loved that character. It was great. And it felt like that the writers, the sort of lead writer on that, and the series, certainly from series 3 onwards, Paul Doolan was just a really great writer, and it felt like they were writing for you, which was a really special sort of thing. Doesn't happen very often, or certainly for me. I really like that. He was a great character.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that was actually filmed in, it was actually filmed in a supermarket, am I right? Or was it like
No, it was a set. It was a set. in an old it's a warehouse in Bristol. It's the bottle factory, which is now it's a studio. But I think they were the first TV show in there. But no, they built the set in there. But it had work when we started. It had working tills. They had a lottery machine. It was like wow. And actually, I would get really confused actually because you go, oh, okay, this is a supermarket, yeah. But no, but they had sort of uh, actual sort of fruit and veg in there. They'd get all these sort of deliveries, which would slowly sort of go off over the sort of course of a series. And then obviously we used to help ourselves to crisps and stuff. If it wasn't over a year out of date, then it was kind of edible. And suddenly go, oh, I need some new batteries. So there was a bit of that going on. But it was it was fantastic. It was very, very realistic set. So yeah, a lot of fun.
And I mean, an amazing cast as well. I mean, Jason Watkins has appeared on this show in the past and just an absolute gent. I mean, you must love when you get to work with a cast of people who are just great. That must be
Yeah.
a joy.
Absolutely, absolutely, and Trolley was exceptional. Actually, it had an amazing sort of core cast, and then they just brought people in, and it was always like, oh, who's coming in this series, And they always had amazing people in, and you get to work with really sort of, very, very sort of talented people. And Jason, particularly, I used to really appreciate his work, and I'd sort of often kind of just go and watch and see what he was doing because he was so professional and so sort of easy with it and very generous and great to work with, really, really pleasant. And again, I think I used to feel on Upstart Crow, I used to sort of go into that rehearsal room and think, crikey, how did I end up here with these people, these extraordinary sort of people? Everywhere I looked around the room, it was like, wow, okay. And it felt really special to be part of that, and a real sort of pinch me moment. I kept expecting to get tapped on the shoulder, you've got to leave, we've made a terrible mistake. But yeah, oh, it's great, absolutely.
I mean, I say the list is endless. I mean, we could talk about them all. Shows like Cold Feet, so many amazing shows. But for you, is there a role or a show that you were a part of that you're most proud of, or that you just enjoyed the most?
Um, yeah, I mean, I enjoyed all of them. It's very rare. I've done a couple of, I mean, I'm not going to talk about it, but I've done a couple of absolute stinkers of jobs, so you really know when something's bad. And occasionally, for whatever reason, things do go south, and there's nothing you can do about it. Your job remains the same. You're just doing what you're doing. And I think I go into everything with the same sort of approach, that I just sort of take responsibility for myself, be open, try and sort of get stuck in, learn my lines, turn up on time. There's not too many sort of demands on you, and try to be pleasant. But so actually, the process is always the same. But there's something really lovely about if you do a show that works, and then you get a second series, and then you do it again, and you feel that you're a part of something. So Upstart Crow was certainly like that. I did a really lovely job with Sue Perkins on a show called Heading Out, and it was uneven, and it felt at times that it was difficult. It was a difficult shoot for all sorts of different reasons, but it was so fantastic to do with such amazing people. And that really felt incredibly special working on that. I felt so honored to be there, and kind of again like, wow, how have I ended up here? How am I doing working with Steve Oram, with Sue Perkins, with Nicola Walker, with Mark Heap, with Dawn French, all these incredible people coming in, just like, this is wow, and it didn't get a second series, which I was kind of amazed about because it had so much potential to carry on. There was so much sort of lovely stuff in it, but for whatever reason, it didn't, it doesn't punch through in the way that you hope that it would. And that was one of those. But that was a very special time there. I was kind of, doing that. And I was doing Miranda at the same time and Trollied. And it felt like I was in this kind of like sitcom, blah. And Heading Out was a really sort of nice kind of thing to go and do up in Manchester, away from the other stuff that I was doing, and with all these incredible people, Yeah,
I
I was
mean,
grateful for it.
I mean, having worked on so many amazing projects, have you ever had the chance to work with someone who you maybe looked up to when you were younger? I mean, like a sort of an idol from your childhood. Have you had that pleasure?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, several times. And I mean, yeah, I mean Harry Enfield on Upstart Crow was one. Paula Wilcox. I used to, like, wow, okay, this is amazing. Yeah, Harry very much so, and being able to sort of regurgitate some of his gags is a real sort of pleasure. And I also, I mean, I did an episode of Red Dwarf, and I can admit that I never really watched that show. I was aware of it, but it wasn't my thing. I was out sort of running around getting into trouble at that time. But I was aware of the show. But I had a thing where I remember seeing Craig Charles doing some performance poetry in probably like 1988 or something like that, 87 maybe. And I remembered it. And I got to work with him I did an episode of Red Dwarf, and I know we were having lunch together, and I got to say, oh gosh, I remember you saying, and I quoted a little bit of this poem because it stayed with me. And that felt really special. And I think he kind of appreciated that. And yeah, it's really nice to be able to do that, to have a little moment with people. And again, yeah, yeah, that a lot with actors who are in things that are significant to you. I did a show I worked with David Morrissey briefly on a show, and he was in a show called One Summer which when I was growing up was like, I think it was the only TV show that I would go and watch. That I would go, I'm going home, One Summer's on, and it was just incredible. So again, I had a little. I know I didn't get the opportunity to sort of share that with him, but it felt really special, being there. So yeah, I've been really lucky to have been able to have that experience a lot, actually. Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, you've done some big projects, and I mean, shows like Bridgerton, but also you've done some big films like Paddington, and we have to talk about Paddington because
Yeah.
Paddington is just such a feel-good film that anyone of any age can enjoy, and you must love those kind of really feel-good films to be a part of.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, and again, that's the sort of kindness of a friend. So Paul King, who wrote and directed Paddington, One, Two, and Wonka, he is an old friend of mine that I met again in Edinburgh at that time, along with Simon Farnaby, who co-wrote Paddington 2 with Paul, and a whole host of other people, these amazing sort of writer performers and comedians, and loads of whom are in Paddington. They're in the first one. They're all sort of people that Paul knows, and he's very generous. You get a message, would you like to do this? It's only going to be a tiny bit. Do you want? And I'm like, absolutely, absolutely. And of course, yeah. I mean, what a thing to be involved in. It was incredible to see someone and to see a friend sort of really at the top of their game, making this incredible sort of film and going on to do Paddington 2. And again, like just helming sort of Wonka, where you're just like, wow, this is huge. So to have a chance to be a tiny part of that, yeah, it was always going to be really sort of bowled over to be invited. Yeah, great. I mean, and again, I remember doing Wonka and I got to spend the day with Patterson Joseph, who's just an incredible actor that I really sort of respected and turned out to be like the nicest man, So I had this really strong connection coming off the back of lockdown. And that was really tough. I think that was we were mid-lockdown doing that job, and I felt very, wow, kind of this is a very strange experience. So, and it turned out to be really positive. So, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you've done so much, and I say we have talked about a fair chunk of it, but is there a dream role still, or a show you would love to do that you've never had the chance to?
There are so many shows that I watch and go, oh wow, I wish I was in this. I wish I was in this. Too many to sort of mention. There are loads. I would love to do more drama. I'd love to do another sitcom. I haven't done any comedy for a very long time. I was doing Bridgerton for a while, and that was a tricky job. You kind of come in and out of that, and they're huge, those shows, and it's hard. I found it hard to get a sense of belonging at times within that show, although it was amazing and a fantastic cast and directors and all the rest of it, all really sort of good and supportive. But I'd love to do a drama. I'd love to just do some more drama, actually, where the character has an arc. And sometimes it's like if my agent sort of rings, it's a bit like, oh, please let it not be the emergency services. I can't play another policeman, please. But yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, also more recently getting to appear in the Jetty alongside
yeah,
I was going to say Olivia Colman. It's Jenna
yeah,
Coleman. I'll get it right.
yeah.
That must have been a joy as well.
Yeah, it was fantastic, and again, a real sort of change of pace for me. And actually, I was really lucky on that because the casting director uh, approached, asked, I was asked to audition for a part in it, and the casting director said, actually, you might want to look at this character. There aren't many lines, but it might be a nice change. I think she even said it might be a nice change of pace for you. Uh, and I looked and I thought, yeah, wow. And actually, I'm so glad that she sort of did that because that's a bit of a risk for them. But ultimately, yeah, it was such a great experience to just do something a bit different. The sort of nasty guy. That was a great show to work on. That was so considered, I think, and was really ambitious given what they had and how ambitious it was. I thought that they did an amazing job on that show. It was really good and a great cast and yeah, good experience. Albeit a bit grim.
Is
You
that
know.
something you'd like to do more of? Sort of the bad
Yeah,
role, the baddie roles.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, just anything that feels challenging and that I feel a connection with. Yeah, for sure, absolutely. I would like to do that, and I kind of yeah. We all change, as we change and evolve, and I'm a very different person to who I was 5 years ago. I feel so. Yeah, the opportunity to try and sort of flex a different muscle, as it were. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, obviously, we're going out on Hospital Radio Reading, and I mean, for any of the amazing NHS staff that are doing such an amazing job, what would you like to say to them? What messages would you like to sort of give out to the hardworking NHS staff?
Um, just to that I hope that they realize that what they do is acknowledged, that people really do appreciate everything that they do, and no one goes into that sort of line of work for money. It's all about sort of care and giving back, and at times, I guess, like my wife has been a teacher for many years, and that can feel thankless at times. And I think that we saw in the pandemic that there was a real sort of like a real realization of the incredible work that people are doing in really challenging environments, and we don't celebrate that enough. And we had that outpouring during COVID. And I just would just say, just remember that and hope, and don't think that because that level of outpouring isn't there, it's not felt. I think it still is, but people get so consumed with stuff that they find it hard to maybe remember that at times. I mean, I know I do. It's like you find yourself in the NHS. No one chooses to be there as a patient. It's always like, oh gosh, there's this, and there's a lot of anxiety, and yeah, it's very easy to forget that people are absolutely sort of pulling out all the stops to do their very best to serve, and it's an incredible thing.
And I mean, to any of the patients who are stuck in hospital, maybe not having the best of times at the moment, what would you like to say to them?
Uh, just hang in there, and better times ahead, and yeah, just hope for a strong recovery, and yeah, reach out and speak to people and ask for what you need, and yeah, that you're in the right place with people doing their very best to get you back where you want to be.
Now, Dominic, I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure. You are welcome back anytime. It's been an absolute joy, but thank you for giving up your time.
Not at all. It's a real pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I really appreciate what you're doing and for having me on, and this kind of service, what you're doing here. It's amazing. It's amazing.